Welcome to The Gap, where it's our mission to bridge the gap between training and on-field performance.
I'm Brett Hart, owner of Hitman Performance.
And I'm Dan Labadia, the owner of Jack Javelin.
Hope you guys enjoy the show. Welcome back, everyone, to this episode of The Gap. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Heenan, which you can find him on Instagram and Twitter. He is very big in the baseball world, being the owner and founder of ATP in Stamford, Connecticut, and is also the creator of the 90-mile-an-hour formula. Josh, how are we doing today?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me.
Dude, it's pretty exciting that you're here. And I was just telling you off camera before that I found your stuff when I was 16 in high school. And just like a quick backstory of, we've talked about Olympic lifts, and I hate doing them. And when I was younger, you made a post saying baseball players shouldn't do it for XYZ reasons, which you can elaborate on later if you feel like it. But that's all I needed, was to say baseball players didn't need to do it. And I was like, perfect, never doing them again. So it's just funny that 10 years ago to now that you're in a house, my house, that we built our podcast room in, and getting to talk and interview you and ask you questions. And it's cool how social media works that way.
It's great. It's a great way to connect with people, and I think you guys have done an impressive job with like actually leveraging it to make those in-person connections. You know, Luke was telling me he had his episode up here with you, and you know, I think that's what social media is all about. I think a lot of people just send messages online. That's kind of it. But I've made a lot of friends. I've made a lot of work acquaintances. We've gotten employees from there. It's like it's a unique tool that we have right now, which is great.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people can do a better job utilizing it.
For sure.
For that.
For sure. As I'm sure we all could.
Yeah, definitely.
Similar to Brett, I found your stuff online too. And, we had connected about 2 years ago now, talking about the difference and similarities between baseball and javelin. And, today we're going to focus more on the neurological side of things, especially with some issues that Brett's been dealing with. But before we get into that, I did want to have you answer a throwing question. My question is, so we talked about it a bunch on the show, and because you've worked with me a couple months ago. I had Tommy John 6 years ago, and I'm getting a bone spur removal in November. So a big issue that I've had when I've thrown is that when my left arm is, instead of reaching out long in front of me, my left arm will almost like chicken wing here close to my body. And I was doing a lot of reflecting, and I am wondering if this is a weird thing about me, but because I am a right-handed thrower, I actually write left-handed, I eat left-handed, I brush my teeth left-handed, I comb my hair left-handed. So everything into my body is left-handed, but anything going outwards is right-handed, like throwing, bowling, tennis, shooting a basketball, anything outwards is right-handed. So I wanted to ask you if you think that there's some neurological thing where my left arm is very comfortable in this closed off chicken wing type position, and if that's the reason why I'm having a hard time in my throw, keeping it long out in front of me so that I could eventually get a longer pull with my throwing arm.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I've never really thought of it, and we don't see too many guys that are ambidextrous in that kind of manner. Did you grow up playing like baseball?
Yeah, so I grew up playing baseball as my first sport at 4 years old, doing t-ball all the way up until my sophomore year of high school when I got cut from the baseball team. So then I ended up going right into javelin.
So I wonder if that is where that pattern comes from, because I would think from like a pretty simplistic standpoint, we're always looking to figure out like excuse me, which patterns are the most efficient patterns, and our body typically tries to find those. And so I wonder if that's just the pattern that you adopted, and you're like, that's my pattern. One of our big leaguers, I was out to lunch with him one day with another coach, and he was showing us videos of his parents taking a video of him swinging when he was 5 years old through like a screen like door. You could see him on the outside. And then he overlaid it with his current big league swing, and it's the exact same swing.
Wow.
And so looking at it, like I have a 6-year-old and I have a 2-year-old, and looking at their movement, running, swing, throwing patterns, it's like really interesting to me to like see. Obviously, like, we're performance coaches, we believe we can change someone's movement, but how much and like what level of influence can can we actually have, it's really interesting because, that guy, his swing has probably changed a little tiny bit in the last 20 years, 25 years. And maybe that's your issue. Maybe that's your underlying cause. From my experience looking at your javelin stuff, not just yours, but javelin throwers in general, it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the javelin throwers do often really do get long on the front and long in the back, correct?
Yeah. And the reason that is because we always talk about how the throwing arm will mirror the block arm. And so,
100%.
A lot of times if a guy is really, really closed off and then swipes across with his left, you see his throwing arm swiping across on his release. But when you get that really long reach out in front with the block arm and you get that lat to roll down, the throwing arm will simultaneously have the lat and the chest roll up. And that's where you're getting that, essentially that long toss throw, because you don't want to have any of that break in the kinetic chain. And essentially when we're pulling our arm in prematurely, that's where you get the bend in the elbow. And then you're almost like flipping up into external rotation, into rolling into external rotation and using the chest to power the launch angle.
Yep.
And so, typically when you see somebody like me, like my tendency was always to bend the front arm. My right arm was always bent. And then I've had, just numerous elbow issues as a result.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It'll be fascinating to see how it continues to progress for you, because with baseball throwers, any motion, but baseball throwers, I'm always thinking front side equal and opposite. So if their front arm is down, like driving down, I want their back arm coming up and vice versa. And I think there's a good balance there, because I think it reciprocates locomotion, just how we walk, how we move in time and space, just as humans. So I wonder, it could be a pattern that you're just pulling it in, and it also could be more of like a trunk stability thing where you're like, hey, I want to gain stability on this front side, and to gain more stability, bringing that arm in is going to really tighten you up a little bit, and that might just be your compensation mechanism.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Like I've dealt with throwers in the past who have had oblique issues, and then their throwing mechanics after those oblique issues is very heavily over rotating on the left side and really ripping the left side down prematurely. So yeah, that makes sense. It'll be interesting to see how things progress after this next surgery.
Can he be fixed is the question. That's all I was thinking about, is like, how would you go about correcting that and fixing that?
What has been the most successful thing to correct it for you, or have you had any success in progressing it?
Yeah, there's a series of drills that Kevin Foster from Javelin Anatomy invented, which is the corkscrew drill, and then you go into the 3-position drill, and then from there you add the left step, and then that's essentially your whole penultimate back foot contact and block. And so when you see the corkscrew drill, it's essentially just keeping your left arm as long as you can and only getting the rolling movement with the left armpit, and then with the right hand, or I guess block arm throwing side, depending on if you're a lefty or a righty. But then with the throwing side, you're just holding the javelin in the handle, and you're not moving the hand forward at all. You're essentially just rolling up with the right side, armpit, chest, and lat to the sky. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you'll progress to adding a little bit of movement here and there, and then you eventually want to just maintain that movement in that pattern as much as you can.
Yep.
And so, that's the thing too, is that I learned those drills basically when I was almost 25. So I'm almost thinking, like, if I did have a head start on it, say I started when I was 16, would I have been able to progress it a lot better? Because my throw did get a lot better into my mid 20s, but at that point, it's like, you look at the podcast and the business that, I've made, and the, all the athletes that I've coached, it's like, that's the primary attention and stuff. So, I think that it has improved, but it's like, that's always my natural tendency. Like, if I haven't touched up on it in a while and I go out and throw, it's like the first thing I notice is that left arm is super short.
Yeah. Well, I think you can always progress those things. So to answer your question, I think those things can 100% be, fixed and optimized. Breaking the old pattern is going to be challenging. One thing that has definitely come across my radar more over the last, I don't know, a couple of years is Tom Brady talked about it, and there's a couple other quarterbacks that talked about it, and it was really more of a, when they're going to throw, they used to throw more of what I would consider like that equal opposite and kind of tucking themselves in, whereas you see a lot of videos, and Tom Brady talks about how Tom House would bring him and just get him almost just like pivoting through the shoulders, which then is probably more of the pattern you're looking for, because baseball is definitely more rotational, and you're definitely more linear, at least in my opinion. So I wonder if those type of drills where you're really, that, what was the corkscrew drill you're saying?
Corkscrew drill, yep.
That probably sounds right. And now it's figuring out that, you know, that kind of like spear of confidence of like, all right, where is the challenge that you're like making a new pattern or challenging a new pattern, and like what can you actually do, and like where's that in between drill that like gets you there, and how do you load it? Because for me, you know, you guys are probably familiar with Robbie Rowe's work, and
Yep.
and Robbie and I are good buddies. I really like his breakdowns. I think he does a really good job at you know, just mechanical analysis and understanding it from more so from like the pitching coach side than like the actual like performance trainer side, even though he does a lot of that. And he always jokes with me when I do like a throwing consult. He's like, what'd you tell him to do? Like throw uphill and with a weighted ball? And I'm like, for most guys, yeah. Like, because a lot of my clientele comes to me with an aggressive trail leg hip flexion issue. They get a little bit of an inverted W. We know there's some trunk stability stuff, and we test drills, and then we figure out which one cleans it up. I think one of my better skills as a performance coach or therapist or whatever you want to call it is I want to find the drill that fixes it versus like hammer something that like someone has to really fight through. So for instance, in the baseball world, we see a lot of people doing pivot picks where they're rotating their pelvis, they're tucking their arm behind them, and then they're throwing the ball into the wall with a plyo ball. Great drill. I'll tell you that maybe 40%, 50% of the guys that I see utilizing it, it just syncs them in a way that's like completely unsynced, or it's not most optimal for what they're trying to clear up, and you can see that it's causing a problem. So they're actually like kind of breaking their way through it instead of like flowing through it. And I think removing that drill is probably a better tool than having them fight through it. So for me, if we wanted to do an evaluation on you, I would say let's pick, 30 drills, and let's start to tease them and then figure out, all right, how can we load it? And I'll tell you the amount of times that we get guys that are like come in with elbow pain, aggressive trail leg hip flexion, all this stuff, and then I give them what sounds scary, but like for some people, not for you guys throw like 50-pound balls, but but for like the baseball world, if I give someone like a 12-ounce or like a 14-ounce ball, a lot of people are like, it throws up a red flag, like, oh my God, that's dangerous. And I'm like, well, we just cleared the pattern and I haven't had to coach it. That's where good coaching, I think, happens. Like, you pick the right drill. Then can you coach it and fine tune it? Sure. But for you, it would be like, let's find the 2 or 3 drills that elicit those good changes, and then let's remove anything that remotely like pulls you back into that old pattern, and let's do that for 2 to 3 weeks with like some pretty high intent, some good volume, and see what happens. And I imagine you make pretty good step progress.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very similar philosophy, like with the whole Jacked Javelin app and the whole library I have is like all of the 60 plus drills that I have that javelin throwers do. And when I have a client that has something that's wrong, we're like, all right, if you have the long pull issue, we go corkscrew 3 position with the left step, so on and so forth. And then if it's like a lower body thing, we'll do the same thing. We'll like hop on the back foot 3 times, work on that internal hip rotation and all that stuff. So we definitely do a lot of the similar things. And I see the same thing too with like the way some javelin throwers throw balls is similar to how baseball throwers throw the pivot pickoffs. It's like they're throwing the ball in a way that is like robotic, and it's teaching them the pushy arm action. It's teaching them to have a very short pull. And I'm like, all right, that's not benefiting your javelin throw. You're essentially just doing the drill just to do the drill at that point.
So this one is going to be a little bit of like a woo-woo-y question, because you're talking about progression and changing body mechanics and stuff that's been ingrained for them forever. Two things came to mind from Jay Schroeder, and then Austin Yoakum actually did talk about it like last year or 2 years ago. The first one with Jay Schroeder is that he used like the electromagnetic or STEM machine, like the APRE wave.
Yep.
And he was saying that's what he used to help ingrain movement patterns just a lot faster because they're shocking the central nervous system to code at a rate that you experience at like childhood.
Sure.
And then that's one modality that I've heard of being able to speed up. And then the second one was microdosing psilocybin. And so I don't know if you know anything about the Jay Schroeder stuff.
I do.
All right, perfect. And then I'm assuming you know a little bit about the psilocybin stuff.
Yep.
From what we've talked about before.
Yep.
So the validity of it, like the science behind it, like this is a rabbit hole that I've pretty much scratched the surface on.
Yep.
And I know it can go a lot deeper.
Yep.
So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on those two.
Yeah, and something that, you know, I think at least you are aware, Dan probably doesn't know, I'm about halfway through my psychedelic training. So in Colorado I'll be licensed, so I'll be able to be a facilitator. It's a tool in the toolbox. I don't think it's a panacea. I don't think it's for everybody. I think that there are, you know, I see a lot of major clinical depression, PTSD, really wild like neurological cases. That's about a third of my caseload. So that's really more of the psychedelic side to it as a tool, as a small tool in the toolbox versus like the only thing that I want to utilize with people. That being said, what's super fascinating about the ARPWADE stuff, like you said, and then the psilocybin is, I think we just don't have a good enough handle and understanding of what is happening at the brain to be able to really point and say this is good or this is bad, or like the Jay Schroeder stuff is more advantageous than a microdose. What we do know in some studies, and most the microdosing studies are wishy-washy. You could, for anything that I say positive, you could find another study that says it's debunked, it's not real. There's a heavy belief with a lot of the research, especially at macro dosing, so like a full-on trip, not a microdose, that you get a pretty big release of BDNF, so brain-derived neurotropic factor. That is kind of a part of the cascade of neurological events at the brain that help you build new neural pathways. In my eyes, the neural pathways is what helps create new movement patterns, new emotional patterns, and helps you basically rebuild those tools. I think ARPWAVE, based on how you're looking at it from like a Schroeder standpoint and how he utilizes it within the training, it's probably similar. I have not seen any research that makes me say ARPWAVE is like the holy grail, although there's a lot of people that I know that swear by it. I also have only dug into it enough to like and used it at certain times with different people. It's been like it's a good stimulus. I think the challenge is figuring out what the mechanism is, and I don't know that we have for either of those a clear defined mechanism that's driving that. Now, could you say upregulating BDNF, which we can do through cold plunging, we can do it through potentially through microdosing, we can do it through lion's mane, can potentially offer some of that, juggling, balance training, any kind of like new neurological stimulus where you have to be reactive and play. Those things all can upregulate. And then if you want to put like an ARPWAVE on top of it to redefine those movement patterns, like put them in a split squat ISO and like just be like, all right, this is we're gonna fix your lunge position and hammer that neurologically so your brain starts to get those signals. It could very well be the tool. I just have seen lots of other tools work. So
I was very curious of just those two. Yeah, I've seen them, I've read a little bit about them, and everyone's looking for like that cheat code or like the one size fits all modality training system. But BDNF, that can be done with like Cal Dietz's goat drill and like the variations and levels to that, and like the whole neurology side of thing is really interesting to me. And we've had people come on and talk about it, And my whole thing now is like the brain optimization of like trying to figure out why the brain does what it does, how it can trickle down to emotion regulation, body movement and awareness, and just overall motivation or just discipline. Like what can make someone more disciplined than the other?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it because of how they grew up, or is it because there's actual chemical deficiencies within their brain?
Sure.
And that's what I pretty much came and went to go see you for, like to figure that out. Like I did your neuro test that you have is 150 questions, or give or take a few. And I was feeling like I was saying a lot. I was saying yes to like a lot of them.
You said, yeah, I think you said yes to all of them.
It's like you stress, like you have trouble sleeping. I was like, man, this is, yep. I was going through them. So I'm curious too about like that assessment that you did. Like, how do you pick those questions and be able to get the readings that you found on me? And you can feel free to talk anything about what you found on.
Sure.
Me. I'm a human test subject.
We all are.
Yeah, I say it all the time. So elaborate more on that, because I still want to know like how those questions gave the response to the serotonin, the GABA, the acetylcholine deficiencies.
And dopamine. So the quiz you're referring to is wired for performance .net, and it's free. It's you take 150 it's 120 questions plus your normal like name, date of birth, all that stuff, and it's yes or no. And there's been other it's based off of the Braverman test, which was a research study that was done, I forget how many years ago, but a while ago. And actually Charles Poliquin had utilized the Braverman test for many, many years with his athletes. So he would look at it and say, hey, this person's a dopamine depleted athlete. We're going to train them this way. This person has like low acetylcholine. We're going to train them this way. The yes or no questions I made modifications on, and have run kind of through our systems, because there's also some Chinese medicine stuff that I'll spit out as well. It talks about qi deficiency, yin deficiency, and some other like heat and cold patterns that are influential to at least allow me to kind of see what this person's going through. So those yes or no questions are a snippet of potentially what's going on. It's not like we're not taking a blood sample. We're not saying, oh, your cholesterol is this. We know your cholesterol is this. This is a more of an anecdotal, these are linked to one thing or another. But what we have found is that if someone's mildly, so there's no deficiency, mild, moderate, and then severe. And you were severe in all, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I think I was moderate on dopamine.
Okay. Maybe that's what it was. So, but usually when I see severe on one of those, moderate to severe, if I see those, it means we definitely have symptoms. And that's all it really means to me. It means there's probably a system that's breaking down. And do you remember what your original question was to me when you DM'd me about?
It was about THC.
It was
microdosing THC for sleep.
Yes, and then we started talking about how you took theanine.
Yeah.
And it gave you nightmares?
Gave me the craziest, nightmares, vivid dreams. Like they were wild.
Yeah. And then, so what's interesting is, and this is why the supplementation stuff is a part of when you take the Wired for Performance quiz, it will spit out your deficiency, and then it will give you like an 85-page ebook that I wrote. All for free, just so you can have like a glimpse of like, hey, this is what Chinese medicine says, this is what the neurotransmitter medicine says, and like how do you put this all together, so you can then start to kind of tease in what supplements you should or should not take, or what lifestyle changes you should make. So you said that the theanine was causing issues, and what I was alluding to with you was that melatonin I've seen people have a lot of issues with both the like the quality of dreaming, and then also a lot of people will take it, they fall asleep quickly, and then they wake up in the middle of the night, and then they just like don't really get a good night's sleep. The melatonin I think is a slippery slope for a lot of people. The theanine I have almost never seen people have negative side effects to, but when someone is low in GABA, which you were severely deficient, that there I don't remember the exact chemical chain, but there's some interaction between theanine and the GABA, and that's where we want to regulate the GABA first, and then the theanine becomes a really good tool. But if we don't regulate the GABA first, it seemingly causes some other issues. So that's where I said, hey, like we should probably look at this. I forget what there was another piece to that. Oh well. But I thought there was another piece to it in our original conversation. But that was like the kind of intro to our intake, saying, hey, you should probably take this intake to figure out like where your deficiencies are. Because when someone comes in and they have a whole host of deficiencies, usually that means they're systemically deficient. It's not like if someone comes in and they show me that they're like really severely deficient in dopamine, they probably present with ADHD symptoms. They probably have a little bit of like a depressive symptoms at time. But those can be really well directed with like some exercise modification, some nutritional modification, lifestyle stuff. And then potentially a little bit of supplementation with one thing or another, or removing certain things like we've talked about with nicotine, caffeine, as the tools getting abused. Same thing with like THC at times. Yeah, so yours was really like a systemic issue. It seemed like the whole system is like throwing up red flags saying, help, like I need help. And that's when I was like, all right, let's get you in. Let's start to tune this up.
Yeah, that makes all perfect sense to me. I mean, I was the guy slamming the pre-workout and energy drinks. You asked me how much caffeine I take a day, and I was probably on average 600 milligrams every day since I was 14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
And I just stimulant junkie, I think is what is
Sure.
it's called in the fitness world. Is
Yep.
that, and then caffeine all throughout that, and then found out about nicotine and using Zins and all the other ones that are the same shit, just different names.
Yeah.
It supersetting those two
Yeah.
of getting nicotine and then caffeine, and then I felt amazing for like a couple hours.
Absolutely.
And then but then you just becoming reliant on it and like needing more. And like you were making the post about the nicotine stuff, and it's completely true. Like you can start with 1-2 pouches a day, but then it slowly becomes within a week you're doing the whole tin.
Well, it also depends on people's makeup, right? So I always tell our interns, when our interns come to start interning with us and start doing our training stuff, and we start them with the warm up, and then we get them into doing the other like programming and training. I always tell them the example of like, hey, if you're in war and you get your leg blown off, heroin is the greatest drug known to man. It's going to regulate your heart rate. It's going to knock out the pain. It's going to allow you to basically stabilize until you can get the medical treatment you need. If you're using heroin to have a good time on a Friday night, that's probably a misuse of the medication and of the therapeutic tool. And I see everything that we've talked about, whether it's throwing drills, whether it's THC, CBD, theanine, caffeine, sugar, doesn't matter. They're all therapeutic tools. ISOs with the ARP wave, they're all therapeutic tools. Are we applying them at the right time, in the right situation for the right person? And are we trying to elicit the right response that we're truly trying to get? So we're trying to balance those things. If you have a system that is heavily depleted on dopamine and you're going to give it little bumps that doesn't help re-regulate it, your bumps of dopamine for you was primarily caffeine and nicotine. So you get these little bumps of like, hey, some artificial dopamine feels fucking fantastic, but your crashes are going to come. And if Dan is super regulated and he has no neurotransmitter deficiencies and he has coffee, my wife I think has like 1 to 2 cups of coffee a day. She's one of the most regulated human beings I've ever seen in my entire life. I can drink like 1-2 cups of tea a day, and that's good for me in terms of caffeine. If I'm gonna like crank a little more caffeine, I might get upwards of like 100-150 milligrams like twice a month. But that's me, and I'm also much lower dopamine than she is. So finding the right balance of those tools, which is why I created the quiz, because then like you guys can be like, I got this guy and he's like crushing caffeine. I'm not really sure. You don't have to refer him to me. Just tell him to take the quiz and you can look at it and be like, oh, like you're super depleted in dopamine. Let's maybe pull this back, because you might realize that in, how old are you now?
25.
You're 25. So you've been utilizing caffeine and nicotine in that kind of window for the last, call it 10 years, and probably to an abusive standpoint where it just becomes, whether we say it's addictive or it creates kind of a cascading event of stuff that's more challenging just because you have to use it to regulate. It might take 6 months to a year, and that's where to get you kind of back to a closer to a baseline. And that's where a lot of people will reference like adrenal fatigue, and like the Western medicine research. A lot of times they're like, adrenal fatigue is not real. And then you look at like some of the Chinese medicine stuff, you look at some of the more like functional medicine stuff, and they'll treat you for adrenal fatigue, and all of a sudden you feel really good. So finding that balance for you or your athletes is really good. Plus it can inform your decision on your training. And that's why you and I even spoke about the other day about your doing tons of ISOs, right? And I'm the biggest advocate for ISOs. Like, I'm probably, every time you post ISO stuff, I'm like, yes, like this is like, it's so good because it's what I believe. It's like, I think it's great therapy and training all like linked into the same thing. Finding the way that we can make sure that your training is appropriate for the acute and chronic conditions that you're having. Watching one of our guys crack the big leagues the other day, I was up until 3:30 in the morning, all jacked up because I was just so excited and so emotional. And then I woke up at like 6 o'clock because I had to go to work. Being a dad now and like running on less sleep or whatever, I can't function on 3 hours of sleep. I just can't. And I had to because I had 8-10 patients that day. So like my training the last 4 or 5 days has literally been like going out in the sun for a walk with my shirt off for like 60 minutes because I'm like, I'm going to bury my system. And I know for me, like I've been a little bit more on edge in terms of like emotionally, like just normally I'm pretty rock solid, and lately it's just been like the ups and downs have been a little bit, the spread has been a little bit higher. And it's just like, I'm just like, oh, I need to pull back. I am like acutely fatigued right now, and I need to rebuild, which is, if this was 5 years ago, I'd probably be like, all right, I'm not going to go for a 1 rep max today. I'm going to go for a 3 rep max. And like, it's still going to shoot me in the foot because it's going to take a lot longer for me to recover. So although I'm probably detraining a little bit, neurologically, emotionally, sleep wise, upping my calories and everything, I'll get back to baseline in the next day or two and I'll feel really good. But like, you've also been in this chronic state for a long time. So if you came in and you had a lot more anxiety, depressive type symptoms, and we couldn't kick it with some of the acupuncture stuff, which I know we'll talk about, I would definitely be the person advising you of like, hey, let's just get you like good regulated circadian rhythm, sunlight, cold exposure, and maybe tear back on training exponentially. Even just like, hey, you're allowed 60 minutes of walking a day and like call it, to regulate the system. But you've responded well, so we don't need to make those changes. But if you didn't, then maybe we need to make some alterations,
So going off of doing the initial assessment, the questionnaire, like figuring out what you're deficient in and what you're lacking in your brain, neurochemistry, whatever. And then you saying if I express something, if I didn't respond to it well enough, to just put training at a back seat and just, all right, say I didn't know anything about you.
Yep.
And I didn't know anything about your assessment or like how to look for it. And I'm going through my training and I feel off. How off do I need to feel to actually be concerned about something like that? Or is it just me being soft and that little bitch voice in my head telling me to just not like to stop, like the David Goggins side of things? And like, that's, I've been into him. I've read his book. I've read both books. Like, I love David Goggins as like a motivation thing, but then I try to implement it. And like within 2 weeks, I'm like,
Stonewall.
I'm dead. I'm dead.
But you're already depleted. So with your symptoms, and we're saying we're calling them anxiety, depression, not in a like clinical needs to be medicated, but a clinical like in my clinical setting, hey, you are running more anxious. Like you told me at the beginning, you were like, I'm usually, I think you were saying like between an 8 out of 10 out of 10 anxiety. That's a heavy level of anxiety. And in depressive symptoms, I think are similar at times.
It's usually like that crash, like
Yeah.
that, like Thursdays were always a rough day.
Yeah. End of the week can be really rough for people.
Because it would be like Monday, just going off training. Like I always knew this. Like Monday was heavy bench, or usually it was squat. Either one. Like, I would interchange them. But like Mondays and Tuesdays were heavy lifting days.
Yep.
Wednesday would just be cardio, and I probably even took off sometimes. And Thursday would be like another upper body day, but I have no juice whatsoever.
Yep.
And then I'd feel great Friday.
Yeah. You need that. You need to understand your natural rhythms, which I think everybody kind of has them. You have them within the day, then you have them within the week, month, year. But looking at and stepping back as like, if one of your athletes came to you and showed you like, hey, I'm basically severely depleted in all of these neurochemicals, I think it's a pretty safe assumption for all of us without really doing much digging to be like, all right, if that person's super depleted, they're probably really sympathetic dominant, right? And so you think of like more of like Jay Schroeder's work, right? And like ISO extremes, and like his whole goal is to make you be able to kind of switch on parasympathetic, sympathetic. And like that's the best athletes in the world I've gotten to work with. The thing that they do better than anyone else I've ever met is like game day, they are ready to fucking kill somebody, and their sympathetic is through the roof, which any of us can do. Any of us that are decent athletes, between stimulants and getting jacked up for the game and the event or the lift or whatever, we can get ourselves up, but how quickly can you get yourself down? That's the elite skill. So figuring out, are you actually getting the adaptations you want? That's where I first start from, like a strength coach mindset. Forget about like the therapy things. I'm thinking, can we actually get you parasympathetic? And can we hold that state long enough where you can start to recover? Because if you've been fighting in this sympathetic state for 10 years, and you've had sleep issues and like other things, you never really get that down regulation. You have no chance to restore, because that's why like our 7 to 10 hours of sleep is so important, because you get your REM sleep, you get your deep sleep, you're getting all these cascades of hormones, neurotransmitters are getting rebuilt. Like if you could think of like some of the hardest days you've had, and you're like, at the end of the day, either you're like super anxious, super depressed, you're like the weight of the world is on you, and you wake up the next morning, you're like, that's not that bad, because you've just rebuilt your neurotransmitters. But you need to be able to do that in a chronic state. So figuring out, are you teetering in an acute situation where it's like, hey, this overtraining is going to elicit the adaptation, and you can think of our overcompensation cycle as like performance coaches. Is this going to help me overcompensate and drive the neural, physiological, muscular changes that we're looking for, or is this just going to absolutely rock an athlete? And when you're dealing with a 14, 18, 22-year-old super healthy athlete, you can basically crush them all day long. You can do whatever you want. But once you get into like, your mid 20s, and then you have stress of work, stress of girlfriend, stress of life in general, and then you're like, and I'm going to add on these training stresses, and you can't recover from them, something will give or something will break. And oftentimes it's the athlete breaking. So did that answer your question?
I mean, yeah, I get broken pretty much every 6 weeks. So
right. And so what's your most common broken thing?
All right. So low back, right hip, like right hip flexor, right hamstring, left shoulder. And then 3 out of the 4 I just mentioned are bothering me right now. Left shoulder.
Which one, if you had to pick one, what's the one that always gets you at the back?
So if it's a more lifting dominant focus workouts, it's the back.
Yep.
If it's more athlete jumping sprinting focus, it's the right hip.
What about if you stick to ISOs?
So right now I'm noticing the right hip is really aggravated and just maximal hip extension.
Okay.
So any type of like slow sled march or any like when the split squat iso and the right leg is the trail leg, and I'm doing the contraction of the front leg and the contraction of the right glute, like I feel like very deep pain and stretch sensation that is like extremely tight.
Okay.
And then even the back of my left shoulder, like a push-up iso, like I feel like the entire time. It's not pain, but it's just awareness that there's definitely something in there. And then the sprinting and the hip flexor get definitely blown up when the hamstring and the hip flexor get blown up when I try to sprint.
How was your training the week after your treatment with me?
It was all isos. It was fine.
Did you feel those things?
When I started to do some type of sprinting, I did notice the hamstring and the hip. Yeah.
So
the shoulder, I think, is just from 4 days of barbell benching for
Yeah.
15 weeks. Like, it's
a lot.
My left shoulder's been rough for a while, and it's crazy because I was a righty playing baseball, and I never had right shoulder pain. It was always the left.
So a lot of what I see in like the what we call functional neurology, so really like how the brain interacts with the rest of the body, I think functional neurology and acupuncture are like almost the perfect intersection. Acupuncture has its own terminology, own view of like why the system does what it does, and puts a lot of people off because they'll say, oh, you have spleen chi deficiency, or you have heat in your heart, and people, and anybody that's a Western mind is like, that's garbage. But their rationale is probably spot on, in my opinion. When you get a good Chinese medicine diagnosis, the functional neurology stuff will say, hey, listen, like your amygdala is like ramped up, you're a little bit more anxious. Did we do we did some eye tracking stuff. Did we throw your goggles on? I forget. We didn't even get to that. We should have done that. We'll do it another time. Your eye tracking and vestibular system needs to be able to stabilize where you are in time and space. So if we think of it from a purely functional neurology eye vestibular stance, if I take an athlete that has chronic hamstring, lower back, shoulder, like you're saying, like they're like every 6 weeks I just get blown up, we can start looking at the training. But if it's been a chronic thing for how long?
A while.
Right?
Yeah.
So
a couple of years, I'd say.
We should definitely do a postmortem at some point. Get you in. We'll put the goggles on. We'll just see kind of what we find, and that would be a good thing we could talk about too. When I put the goggles on someone and I ask them to look up, down, left, right, we're looking to see how stable their eyes are. That's really what I'm focusing on. If you are stable and you can own the positions, and I say look right, and you actually look right, whereas like sometimes people will have like one eye that looks right and the other one looks straight, or like they don't fully look right, that's our first indication of like, where does your brain think you are? And if your brain doesn't know where you are relative, if it doesn't predict where you truly are or where right really is, good luck. Right? Like people come in all the time. They're like, I have the yips. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't spot up and play catch play. I'm like, well, your nervous system your brain and your eyes have no idea where you are. It's like you're trying to play catch on a like a rocking boat. And it's like, you're never going to be able to like properly elicit those perfect positions like we talked about earlier. It's like, that's why the isos work so well, is like you lock in that split stance, you get good glute engagement, the trail leg, you get good quad engagement, trunk engagement, and your body says, this is our position. The 90 mile an hour formula, I believe with all of my heart, I knew putting it out there was going to be a big challenge, because like everybody's going to scrutinize it. It sounds salesy, it sounds like gimmicky. And it's so simple that you're like, people are like, oh, this is easy. And this, like, everybody can throw 90, this is silly. But the one thing that I don't talk about with the 90 mile an hour formula as much is that if your eyes vestibular system are not regulated, I don't care how much you lunge. You can lunge 315, but if your body's always tilted to the side because it thinks that, it thinks left is actually down, which happens for some people, and you're in this is your position, then it's like you're building strength, power, movement capacity in a position that's like suboptimal. Good luck getting to rotate properly. It's just not going to happen. So if you're running and you constantly are tugging on that hamstring in a position that isn't optimal for you to actually engage, then that's where I'd say we'd start, because ISOs, in my experience, and probably both of your experiences like coaching, ISOs fix basically everything except for the vision, vestibular, like neurological component. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like you gotta regulate that first system, and that's the system that I want to bring some more coursework to like the general training, strength coaches and therapists, because like they just overlook this stuff, and then it's like we're getting guys that are in their second, third, fourth Tommy Johns, and like nobody's looked at their eyes. You look at their eyes and you're like, oh, I've had 4 concussions. Like my brain has no idea where I am. Like that's a problem.
That sounds very similar to square one.
So square one, I've never taken square one. But square one, I believe, is just another, I think they all can be bucketed: acupuncture, square rung, functional neurology tools, Z Health, even at some level, I wouldn't even say that that's one, but they're all functional neurology tools. It's trying to regulate the system, and they're great. RPR can do that at some levels, right? It's, to me, it's like what will make it stick, and that's the question. So, have you taken square one?
I've had it done on me,
Right?
and that was like, he's actually coming. The guy that administered to me is actually coming on the podcast.
Great.
Saturday.
Awesome.
Because I still don't know what the hell he did to me.
Yeah.
It's just like look up to the right, sniff, look up to the left, sniff, look right, hum, blink really fast, like rapid eye movement.
Yep.
And I saw a post about that from, I don't even know Grant Fowler's work at all, but this is
Familiar.
like years ago. And he was talking about like the rapid eye movement during a 315 wall sit.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was pretty interesting. And I still didn't understand why or know why, but I think that was his attempt to get the vestibular system working within the isometric.
Yes.
And he was saying he was able to actually last longer.
Yep.
With rapid eye movement and forcing his eyes to track faster.
Yep.
And that's the whole thing with the goat drill as well, or anything that the Cal Dietz uses, that the eyes need to follow something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he calls it like the goat warm up, where it's just running around in circles, but it's much more than that because you're trying to get the brain involved as well.
Yes. Yeah. No, you have to regulate those systems if you want. The muscular system is the last, it's the last real line of defense for anything. It's the first thing to break, and it's the last thing that's gonna like be seen in the whole chain of issues. If you don't regulate the other stuff, in my opinion, at this point, we're wasting our time.
Do you sorry, I don't mean to cut you off,
no,
but I just had the question that I really wanted to ask. Do you think we, as just coaches in America, overemphasize the just muscular system?
100%. We all do. I don't know any coach, including myself, that hasn't just fallen into that trap, because it works. And really good strength training, if you take an athlete that is regulated, neurologically regulated, so like your twin brother but without any of the neurological neurotransmitter deficiencies, and we just give him ISOs, he's going to respond really, really, really well. And he's probably not going to have like any injuries. Like the thing that I noticed when I've run 6-12 week cycles of like ISO programming is like you feel like you're walking on water, you feel like you're moving, you feel like you're sprinting, like just everything's like moving the right way, and like you're super resilient. If you are not getting resilient from it, my hunch is it's all neurological stuff, and you may just be pushing that system, whether it's the eyes and vestibular system not regulating as much as it needs to, or if it's the you're just blowing up the neurotransmitters in your system in terms of like you're just so depleted that you're just like your body's like, hey, we can't do this anymore. And so yeah, I mean that's really what I think is probably happening.
Yeah, it's just so hard for me to understand. Is it brain or is it muscle? Or is it bone or is it structural?
Well, that's why we do our evaluation, and like I said, come back. We can like do like a full evaluation and look at each thing. So I look at when I make my clinical diagnosis, it's we'll just use your shoulder start. Like, do we have a joint pathology? Is it truly coming from the joint? Does it look like it could be a labral tear, a slap tear, rotator cuff degeneration, something like that? If we find that and it looks like that, then like, hey, like I'm referring out right away. Like that's like I'm not a surgeon. I can't fix those things. We can make you feel better and we can help you move better. But if the true underlying pathology is orthopedic in nature, that's for an orthopedist. That's where we refer out. If it's movement, strength, neurological, there's no one better on the planet than myself, my team, to get those things right. So that's why I want to be able to help more coaches be able to, assess and evaluate and then be able to give their own like on the fly, like generalized idea diagnosis where it's like, hey, this guy, like he's got a hamstring pathology, but like when I have him do a single leg drill and get his vestibular system involved, all of a sudden the pain goes away. Did I like fully answer that question?
I believe so. I mean, I always just get stuck in the thought of, now I'm learning about the neurology side of things and the brain things. And I was always just taught to the traditional rehab route, like train the muscles around the area, and hopefully that works. And it does to a point, but
Sure.
Then it's now accessing more range of motion, getting stronger. Strength through length is something that javelin throwers and what Dan talks about a lot as well.
Yep.
So trying to implement that stuff. And then now I'm realizing, all right, maybe it's not my muscle that's the problem now. It's the brain and how it receives information. And
Yes.
like we had Sam Davis on from Neurological Fitness talk about, there's people with, if you put them in an MRI, like they have something torn or injured,
Everybody.
but they don't feel it and there's no pain.
Right.
So that's pretty much what I'm trying to figure out, is if I can just gaslight my brain enough into telling it that nothing hurts, so I can just focus on performance.
Well, that's why you got to rule. That's why you got to rule those things out, and that's why like a good, full diagnostics on all of your injured parts can then give you some really good leeway of like, hey, like maybe you do have a nasty like slap tear or something orthopedic that just is not going to get cleared up unless you have surgery, but all the other stuff is perfectly fine. So it's like, all right, you really work hard on the other stuff and train it, and then you work around the shoulder a little bit, and then or you get a procedure done, and like the quicker you cut to the chase, it's like that's the pinwheel we don't in the hamster wheel we want people to like be off of. It's like, I don't want you to be injured every 6 weeks, because it's not the presence of pain changes your neurology immensely. It changes your mood, it changes your emotion regulation, it changes your depletion in chemicals. It is challenging, and that's why we have like an epidemic in this country of like, people are it's the average human is in the United States is now body fat percentage fatter than like the average hog. It's like, that's an absurd statistic, right? These people are in pain all day long. If you're in pain, everything else gets more challenging. You can't think straight. Like, I have a hedge fund trader I was treating the other day, and he's like dealing with some horrible back pain, probably needs surgery. And we're nudging him to stay out of pain as much as he can, and he's like, dude, I couldn't even make decisions today. He's like, I pulled my coffee off the coffee pot and the coffee was still like dripping all over the counter, and his wife was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, and you're running and you're moving money in our financial markets, like you're making real changes. So as I'm joking with him, but yeah, I mean, that's what we're dealing with. And like, we got to figure out how to get you out of pain and keep you out of pain.
Yeah, the pain is definitely, I completely feel that. Like, as soon as you feel something that's off, like in the shoulder, like bench pressing, it was very evident like the last couple of weeks of the program I was running, where like as soon as I felt my left shoulder a little bit, I was like, the whole workout's done. I was like, I don't want to do this at all. Like, I'm sick of it.
Yep.
I'm tired of it. And Like I can try dumbbells. Nope, still hurts. Smith machine, push-ups.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, all right, well, I'm just going to go home.
Yeah.
And then that literally ruins your day. Like, especially people like how we are and just in our field and strength and conditioning.
Yep.
And like in the social media era of like where we're growing up in, where everyone posts their workouts and posting the highlights and highlight reel. And then you're there being like kind of on the sideline, like definitely getting FOMO, just watching people train the way I really want to train.
Yeah.
And I'm just still like, it's not there yet.
Yeah. Well, you also have to become the person that can do those things and that can handle that volume. And like, we'd love to do like the the elaborate ending of like the EDI circuits of Jay Schroeder stuff, and like that stuff is like absolutely brutal. But most people can't do like a proper glute ham raise, so like we got a lot of work to do. You know.
Yeah, I'm always looking ahead and then wanting that next thing, and then that probably what gets me hurt anyways. Like the classic, just
yeah. But if you're low dopamine, you're gonna chase the shiny object. You're gonna chase the thing that you're like, the novelty. It's gonna feel good, right? It's like, yeah. I mean, it's definitely like an epidemic of like people we have just in general. Like we're attached to blue light, we're attached to non-native EMF, we're attached to not getting enough sunlight, and all the dopamine is getting depleted. And then you add someone that like is already dopamine depleted, and it's like, all right, this is a challenging situation, and that's why you have to figure out how to like navigate it. Doesn't mean you have to go monk mode and like not.
I've thought about going monk mode a lot,
right?
Just to delete everything. You probably and just go live in the woods and nothing.
You probably feel, honestly, give it a couple of weeks, you probably feel like a new human being, as long as we can regulate the other stuff. If you think about like sympathetic tone, and you just think of that your system, when you the amount of athletes that I know, especially baseball players, that abuse caffeine, nicotine, stimulants, like Adderall, things like that, and they're like, I see the ball better, I feel better, like all those things. Great for performance enhancing when used appropriately at times. But what does it do? It locks in and stabilizes their nervous system. So for you, you're likely able to, and I think I told you this when you came into me, I have people that come in and are so dysregulated. Their eyes are all over the place, they have back pain, they have this and that. They drink their coffee, they take their Adderall, whatever their stimulant of choice is, and we'll retest their eyes and they're rock solid. And you're like, and once I saw that for the first time, I'm like, this all makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't you stabilize your nervous system? Why wouldn't you give yourself the best feeling and also understand that like you move really well through time and space, and it's a really good Band-Aid or a really good performance enhancer if you're using it as a performance enhancer. If you're using it to self-medicate, which is what we talked about, it's like that becomes a problem. So getting that nervous system to regulate, and then that sympathetic tone, your eyes like really almost kind of come in at times and lock, and that's like you're ready to fight a tiger, right? But if you're like scrolling an Instagram article or a tweet or something like that, and you're like fucking locked in, it's probably not an appropriate use of your sympathetic tone, right? When you're supposed to be able to like go on a walk and like gently, like your eyes naturally go side to side, and you're grazing, your eyes are grazing the horizon to make sure that there's no tigers that are going to come and eat you. And that's where you can get really parasympathetic. That's why like Japan, they talk about like going forest bathing, and you're like the doctors will write a script and say, go spend 4 hours, go walk in the forest. And they're like, I had someone that had 3 years, has had like an 8 out of 10 headache. His migraine headache started the week that he was going to propose to his girlfriend. He proposed to his girlfriend. He had all these other issues. 2 years later, ends up in my office. And I basically, after his first treatment, acupuncture helped a little bit, and maybe got him to like a 5 to 7 out of 10. So a little bit of improvement, but nothing to write home about. I said, dude, you're in for the next couple of days. Go find, like, just go do some forest bathing. He left his phone in his car, and he went walking for 4 hours, and he's like, my headache got down to like a 2. This guy's been in headache for 8 out of 10 for 2 years and got him down to a 2. He was able to release that sympathetic tone, and he was able to get a little bit more parasympathetic. So That's where it's like, and then his eyes can start to actually go back and forth, and now we're using our bodies properly. That's the challenge, and everybody has to figure out how they can get there. And that's why a lot of the treatment stuff that I do is like, can we get you, how do we work together? Because I'm not going to have all the answers, because you have to figure out like what works for you, what makes you feel better, how do you respond, all those things. It's a unique journey for everyone.
Yeah, that's definitely something I struggle with, is the relaxing and the relaxation, and to downregulate.
So I kind of have a genuine question, just from like a younger man to an older man, right? You got like performance coach to performance coach, business owner to business owner, future father to father. When I started caffeine 3 years ago at 23, right around the time I got engaged and started taking my work very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And then this year, when I completely left my other jobs and was doing this full time, and had a lot more demand in terms of my work volume, but also just like providing for me and my wife, I started using the Zins, because I felt like in a day I was working, 12 to 16 hours a day. Sometimes you got like 9 sessions plus the online programming, the social media, the podcast, all that stuff that goes with, being an online and in-person performance coach. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's a little different from Brett, just because like I started more recently, and I feel like my use of nicotine and caffeine is correlatory with my work volume and my stress. So like, how do you go about going through your day-to-day life as a father, as a business owner, as a coach, when you got a bunch of clients to look after, and just maintaining that energy and focus without abusing stimulants?
So it's a good question. I think, one, I don't have it all figured out. I always, when people ask me questions like this, it's usually other business owners. They're like, how do you do it all? And one, I don't. Talk to my staff. They'll tell you things will be missed by me. I'm not perfect. Ask my wife. I'm definitely not perfect. I always think that Jeff Bezos is like such a unique example, right? Like, he has the same 24 hours in a day that you and I do, yet when he was cranking out and really moving Amazon into being what Amazon is, like, he still would get his full night's sleep. He's still doing all the things that like a normal human needs to do. He just picks a better domino to move, right? And so I think there's a book written by Gary Keller. It's called The One Thing. And the whole premise of the book is, what's the one thing that you're going to do? And I'm going to butcher the actual phrase, but it's, what's the one thing that you're going to do that's going to basically make everything else obsolete or make everything else easy. And so for you guys, it might be, if you're like, hey, if we added 100 more clients to our client roster, that's just going to make our life like perfectly easy. Maybe it's client outreach. Maybe it's doing more podcasts. Maybe the podcasts are your one thing that drive in all that business. For me, I juggle a lot of things. I really enjoy treating. I can treat 10, 12 hours in a day, and like, I'm still jazzed up. I get a lot of energy from it. You stick me in front of a computer and do more admin work, sometimes I want to jump off a cliff. So like, so me learning, it probably sounds familiar. Yeah. So, me learning to delegate better is a skill that I'm constantly trying to work on. And then getting people on board that are like real high quality people that understand the task and can do the task well. And then understand that like, we can't be everything. If you want to be a really, really good strength coach, you got to put in the hours. You still have to, do those things. If I want to be a really good therapist, I need to do those things. So, I like learning too. So I try to lean on the things that give me energy and then try to delegate as much as I can. And I think over the years, I've definitely gotten better. I imagine that in the next like year or two, I think I'm going to really kind of explode on that. I think we're at a point where I can like start to really delegate some stuff. So it just, everybody kind of has their own journey with it, but delegating and then focusing on the things that give you energy is like the real big movers in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so true, because I even see it with myself. Like, no matter how the online grows, and I've talked about this with Brett, no matter how big the online grows, it's like you still want to always have those 10 to 20 sessions in person a week. And like for me doing the first javelin camp this summer, having 40 people come out, and a lot that flew from out of state and even out of the country. It's like that, seeing that and like the 40 people wearing like my logo on the shirt was like the coolest thing ever. And
So
it's
cool.
like, that's where like, dude, I could have not slept for a week going into that. And
100%.
I would have been like, I don't need anything to get me through this. Like, this is just my environment.
Yeah.
So I think that like you said, definitely finding the delegation. I think maybe with some of those like long form content pieces like the podcast and the YouTube within the next year, I think will be definitely pretty big.
And leaning into what would you do if you hit the lottery tomorrow and you got $1 billion? Like, what does your day-to-day look like? For me, honestly, I'd still treat 10, 15 hours a week. I'm not going to be doing 40-hour treatments every single week, but I definitely, nothing gives me a greater high and enjoyment and pleasure than like someone coming in that's had like elbow pain for 3 or 4 years, or back pain for 15 years. And they're like, I just don't know what to do. And I'm like, one treatment and either get them cleared, or like, they're like, oh my God, I can tie my shoes again. And you're like, that gives me a rush that is insurmountable. So I would still do that stuff, even if I hit the lottery. And if you can lean into those things, everything else gets a little bit easier.
All right, Josh, thank you so much for coming on. It was a great time talking to you. Yep. And, we got to do this again sometime.
Hell yeah. Let's do it.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in.
And if you enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star rating and review and share the show, because the only way that this show grows is if you like it, share it, and tell your friends and family about it.
New episode every Monday.